preview of Hearts of Iron 4. For those of you who were not aware, I was away in England for, well, I was away for a week, but only the first couple of days of that were actually for this event that Paradox put on. It was basically a multiplayer LAN party sort of thing for media to check out the upcoming World War II grand strategy game, Hearts of Iron 4. Full disclosure right off the top, Paradox did pay for my flight both ways and my hotel for the first couple of days that I was in Old Windsor, and then I did, and the meals while I was there, of course, as well. And then I went off on my own after the event was over and stayed in London on my own time and came home. But in any case, if you're the kind of person who's interested in stuff like that, and you may be, that is something that you should know in advance of this preview, even though I'm not going to issue like a call to action, you know, like you should pre-order at this link, blah, 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 blah. That is, you know, the kind of thing that can influence opinions. Anyway, so myself, there were a lot of people there, but it was me, from the people that you might know. It was me, Mathis, Arumba, Quill18, another YouTuber by the name of The Solar Gamer, and then there were a lot of writers there, people from PC Games N and Wargaming, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, etc., etc., etc. So basically, we played probably about 20 hours of Hearts of Iron 4, which you're going to be seeing in the background here, and we were able to capture footage and stuff like that. And that 20 hours was spread out over the course of 3 games. And I'll give you a brief overview of how things sort of went down, but first let's explain what the heck Hearts of Iron 4 actually is for those of you who might not be familiar. Hearts of Iron is a grand strategy series from Paradox. In contrast to something like CK2 or EU4, which deal with the Middle Ages and the medieval area, and then the Renaissance or the Age of Exploration, more accurately, this has a much narrower focus. It focuses on the events immediately preceding and then during the Second World War. So the default start for the game is at 1936, so a few years prior to the, you know, accepted outbreak for World War II, I guess, in 1939. And it runs, we didn't actually ever hit the end date, but my assumption is that it ends sometime around 1946 in that region. Like, it runs for roughly 10 years, which seems low if you're used to playing something like CK2 that runs for like 550 years, or EU4, which runs for nearly 400. But instead of each day ticking by, like being 1 tick in the game, each hour is 1 tick in the game. So I'm not going to say whether it's necessarily longer or shorter than those games if you played it on a constant speed, but certainly it has that kind of like, you know, campaign could be 20, 25, 30 hours if you played it as slow as you wanted to. Or you could probably finish it in like 3 or 4 hours if you played the whole thing on speed 5. You probably miss a lot, but sometimes that's how I like to play those games. It is not intended to actually end. Well, let me put it this way. It doesn't actually like game over you in 1946. We were talking to the lead developer, and he said that the intention is that that's when like you'll get your score if you're interested in that, and then you can keep playing, maybe not indefinitely, but for years afterwards in order to live out your war if it's not over by that point. So the entire focus of the game is the build up to the Second World War and then the resolution. So this is, I have in my notes here, like, differences between Hearts of Iron 4 and EU4 / CK2, in case you're interested. This is not a game where you're going to be playing as like a small country. Well, I mean, you could if you wanted to. You can play as every country in the game. You know, I played as Canada in one game. Canada did play a role in the Second World War for sure, but it's certainly not one of the necessarily major powers like the United States, Germany, Great Britain, Japan, etc., etc. You get the idea. But you're probably not going to be doing like a world conquest as Albania or something like that in Hearts of Iron 4. It's a game that's focused on total war, and it really is just like, it's not like EU4 in the sense that you're going to fabricate a claim, take over one province, wait for your truce to expire, take over another few provinces. It's not EU4 set in 1936 to 1946. It's really like the entire game focuses around the build-up to one war, and then all people on all sides duke it out, and there's some kind of resolution, and that's pretty much where it ends. You know, once the big explosion of war happens, let me put it this way. I think you're not going to see 2 major, huge world wars in one game of Hearts of Iron 4. Once one side is completely beaten, which is what it takes to get a truce from them, there's no way to negotiate without having like a full capitulation. It's all about total war, basically. You're not going to see 2 big world wars, because one is going to destroy everyone who loses and a lot of the people who wins as well. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. But yeah, in other contrasts or other comparisons with EU4 and CK2, there's much more minute control over it. So in EU4, you have your army, 15 units, 20 units, 100 units. That would probably be bad for attrition. You kind of click and drag a box over them, and you just right-click on a province where the enemy troops are, and you destroy them. Or lose to them, for that matter. It's a lot different. You have a lot more minute control in Hearts of Iron 4. Specifically on the military side, you can draw front lines, battle plans, defensive lines, offensive lines, and then assign units to them minutely, or like individually. So you could have like an army group A and an army group B, or an army group red and army group yellow, and have them execute like a pincer attack. And you don't want to have like 10 units sitting on each province. You're going to have like 1 unit on each province, or even less, just trying to maintain like a solid line. So that's something you probably want to watch like Quill or Arumba's preview on it, if Arumba's is up yet, to get a little bit more minute detail on it. But definitely the way you wage war is a lot more minute and different, and you have complete control over stuff like production and research and supplies and stuff like that. Like, you choose your research as you go through the game, and you have to supply your armies accordingly. Like, you have to build factories. Military factories will produce military goods, airplanes, helmets, guns, etc., or you could produce tanks, or you could produce submarines, etc. You know, I'm giving you kind of a gross oversimplification, but this is like the akin to that, or what the analog of that in EU4 would be like. Okay, you've set up your army. You know, you're going to build 10 regiments. Now you have to make sure that you have enough shields for them. You have to make sure you're building enough spears for them. You're building enough muskets, etc. You definitely, because the game has a much narrower focus, you have much more depth in terms of your focus as well. There's a lot more to manage. It is a little bit more of a micromanagey game for sure. You can still play it with a look at the macro, or a look at the bigger picture. You know, you can abstract it a little bit. That's how I play those games for the most part. And I've done some single-player stuff in Hearts of Iron 4 that has worked out really well for me with that kind of mindset. I should point out, I mean, this is 6.5 minutes into the video right here, but in addition to like the 12, no, maybe more than, maybe 15, 20 hours we played at the event, I've played, well, I can just go see on Steam, because they give us beta codes in advance so we could practice, because it is, you know, a game that requires some tutorialization. Oh, they removed it, so I can't see how many hours I had, but I had at least maybe 8 to 10 hours then, so I played like 30 hours of it so far, and I'm still learning about it, which is good, but also, you know, indicative of the complexity involved, I guess you could say. In addition, and this is going to be just rambling in this video, I didn't realize, I thought it was going to be like a 5-minute long preview, but I got a lot to talk about. In comparison to EU4 and CK2, the point of reference for probably a lot of people, it seems like my hunch is, from what I've played so far, in a single-player game, it's going to be a little bit less absurd. You know, you are not going to do a world conquest as, you know, one of the Japanese islands or something like that. Japan is unified at the start of the game. But anyway, it seems like the AI is... I'm trying to think of how I should explain this. The AI is not necessarily set in their ways, but they have a role to play that is somewhat pre-programmed in or influenced in advance. For example, France and the United Kingdom start off with an alliance. Rarely will you see a France, you know, splinter from that and join Germany for an alternate history in which, you know, Western Europe just colonizes, or not colonizes, but steamrolls the rest of the world. Similarly, you know, Japan starts in conflict with, well, I should say the People's Republic of China starts in conflict with China. There's national focuses, which kind of direct what happens in the game. They're kind of like major moments in the game. Like, for example, if you're playing as Germany, you'll have a national focus that is remilitarize the Rhineland, and that causes other countries on the Allied side to possibly get angry at you and, you know, possibly declare war, but probably not. But maybe. And then there's other ones like the Anschluss and, you know, annexing Austria and stuff like that. So you're definitely directed to go a specific way. And my assumption is that the AI will mostly play the roles that those countries sort of played in real life. However, that is not to say that there's not a chance for alternate histories. That, I just think it's less of a chance than, like, I played as Saxony and took over the world in 400 years. It's going to be a little bit more narrow focus again. The exact scenario that I described, where France allies with Germany and then takes over the world, actually did happen in one of the single-player games that I rushed through before the beta version got yanked out of our Steam accounts to make sure we didn't get burned out on it. As Germany, I supported the fascists in France. There was a civil war in France in like 1939 or something like that. They became Vichy France and then asked to join the Axis faction, which Germany is the leader of. I was playing as Germany, in case that's not clear. And then, with France as my ally, I just steamrolled the USSR and completely full annexed them. And that was pretty much the end of the game. Germany had taken over, you know, from Luxembourg, basically, from their border with France, all the way east to Japan, effectively, and the United States also stayed out of it there because they elected, like, an isolationist president. There's a lot of moving parts, so you can have these weird alternate histories, and that's really where a lot of the fun comes in, is like in EU4 being like, oh, you know, Sardinia-Piedmont took over all of the Holy Roman Empire. That's a crazy alternate history. You can still get that. I do think that it's going to be a little bit less likely than it is in those other games where they're pretty much just painting the map. It's also less focused on wars and conquest and more focused on the war. In a way, it's almost like a little bit more board game-esque in that there's like two phases. There's the build-up to the war, where Germany, usually, I mean, could you play, do you have the freedom to play a peaceful Germany? I suppose you're going to end up like not doing some of your national focuses. Like, you might as well play as a different country in that case. But, there's like the build up to the war, and then there's the war itself, and then when the war's over, you kind of like tally up the score and you say, okay, the Allies won this one. So it's not really about, it's not a long con. It's a pretty, you know, you build the powder kegs and then you blow them up, basically. It's also team-based to some extent, like it's faction-based. You can create your own factions, which is something that a lot of people were asking about. The factions by default are the Axis, the Allies, and the Comintern. So the Allies start with, I think, France, Great Britain, or United Kingdom, and I believe the Commonwealth countries, so British Raj, which is India, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, I might be forgetting some in there. The US is weighted, I think, towards joining the Allies, but it could stay out of it, or it could join the Axis, or it could join the Comintern, depending on who you elect. There's a little bit of a politics system. The Axis starts with just Germany, but Germany has national focuses that influence Italy, Spain, and Japan towards coming into it, assuming nationalist Spain wins the Spanish Civil War. And the Comintern, I believe, is just the USSR at its start, but that doesn't mean it's not powerful. But yeah, we created our own faction. In the second game I played, first one I was Canada, which was a lot of fun. I ended up doing an amphibious invasion of Brazil during the war, which went well, but should not have gone well. I got lucky on that one. I was Yugoslavia. I was playing next to the guy who was Turkey, and then across from me was the guy who was playing Hungary. Oh, sorry, no, he was playing Romania. So we were all like in this, you know, kind of like the Eastern European Balkan area. We created our own faction called the Eastern Bloc, and, you know, by our powers combined, we're able to influence global politics in some cool ways. And then there were some Baltic countries, or Nordic countries, I always get the name wrong, but anyway, that they, by themselves, individually, they don't have a lot of power. Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, no offense meant, but, you know, historically accurate to some extent. They banded together and formed a faction called the Northern Lights, and they were able to do some stuff together that was really cool. So that's the kind of stuff that I feel like it's important to point out. There was a multiplayer game with humans acting in accordance with their own beliefs to probably create entertaining absurdity. That might not happen in the single-player game, but the multiplayer games we had a lot of cool stuff like that. But I'm digressing a little bit. What I mean is that, what I meant to say when I brought this up is that it's a little bit more team-based. You are playing as Germany, but you're not playing as like, I'm going to be Germany and crush the whole world by myself. You're trying to court allies and stuff like that. And same for the Allies. As the Allies, you're limited in what you can do. You can't really declare war on somebody, and that's why I mean this is so not EU4 or CK2-like. You can't just declare war on somebody willy-nilly. You can't be United Kingdom or Canada and be like, I'm going to invade Mexico. There's a overall signifier called world tension, which represents how scared the world is basically about what's happening. As an allied country, or a democratic country in most cases, you're not really able to do too much aggressively or even defensively in some cases until that world tension climbs. And the world tension climbs with things like, you know, unfavorable pieces, declarations of war, justifying war goals, which is basically this game's version of fabricating claims. Trying to think of what else raises. A lot of Germany's national focuses just push it up a little bit, based on them trying to wait it so war will eventually happen. So it's important, you know, that you play the game differently, or at least we did, based on whether we were an ally or an Axis player or a Comintern or a neutral. And I think that's all I wanted to talk about with respect to EU4 and CK2. I just want to point out it is a different game. There are similar aspects. You spend a lot of time looking at the map. You do manage your leader, your politics. You do espionage type stuff. The diplomacy screen is pretty similar. Another thing that's different is war, and your truces, basically, peace negotiations. I didn't talk about it, but every country has something called national unity, which is a representation symbolically of basically how much unity they have nationally, you know, how much people believe in their national identity. If national unity is strong, it's impossible, like literally impossible, to get a country to accept a peace until you take them over completely. If your national unity is 90%, someone needs to take over 90% of your provinces, or occupy 90% of your provinces to get you to peace out. If your national unity is really bad, France has some wavering national unity at the start, and I believe there's a big communist or fascist like splinter group that can cause a civil war there. Then, let's say they have 40% national unity. If you take over 40% of their provinces, you can probably full annex them right there. Which is really interesting and, you know, I think somewhat a good representation of what war was like in the Second World War. You know, it was a total war type situation, and capitulation based on some sense of national pride, I guess, or not maybe not national pride, but you know what I mean, togetherness. Maybe I'm making myself look historically ignorant here, but anyway, I don't want to get into it. The other thing is that the pieces are done in conference. So let's say I'm Germany and my friend is the USSR, and we've both waged war against France. Whoever has, there's like a certain amount of points, or I should say available points, in a peace negotiation. If you're the first, if you've contributed the most to the war, you get to choose first. So you might say, okay, I'll annex this, 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 and this. And then that's 100 points out of a possible 250. Then you pass the turn on to your friend. Your friend has 150 available points, and they say, okay, I want them to, I wanted them to pay war reparations. I don't even remember if that's actually a thing. But just for a hypothetical here. Then they'll pass it back to you, and you kind of trade it back, and you build your own treaty, basically, which I think is a really cool way to do that, even though we didn't have it. We didn't really understand it fully as we were doing it, but as it started to come and percolate and we understood what was going on, it was really cool. The other thing that's neat about that is that it's not like EU4 where just the war leader gets to negotiate and you're like, yo, dude, make sure I get Tyrol, okay? Like, I want Vienna, you know? Instead, you'll be like, okay, just leave me enough score so that I can take it myself, and then you've got some agency over that, which is cool. All right, so that's, to some extent, the differences between Hearts of Iron 4 and EU4 CK2. If you recognize the similarities between the game and the differences, I think it's pretty easy to understand where you're coming from here. And again, I would encourage you to watch Quill's video. I know it's up. I'm not sure about Arumba's yet. I would encourage you to watch it in order to get a feel for a little bit more of an in-depth analysis from somebody who's maybe got more experience with those games in the future. I am coming at this from the perspective of somebody who is new to the game, new to the series, I should say. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Is it newbie-friendly? Yes and no. After, it took me like 20 hours in, including my beta play before the event, to really understand how to use airplanes, or how to, you know, get a good supply line so my units didn't get crazy attrition. I still barely understand how to use the Navy, but people seem to be figuring it out, you know, by and large as time went on. In terms of national complexity, like complexity in running your country, it's way more Victoria 2 specifically, than it is EU4. It's not really set it and forget it. You know, in EU4, you don't have to worry about many things when it comes to the day-to-day running of your country. In Hearts of Iron 4, you do to some extent. You've got to worry about, you know, do I have enough iron to produce tanks? Do I have enough rubber to produce tanks? Okay, I can trade with rubber, or I can trade with the United States for rubber, but then if they get mad at me, they won't trade as much rubber and I won't be able to produce tanks anymore, so this is something I have to take care of. The trade system is pretty rudimentary and needs some pop-ups or alerts right now. Right now, you just got to constantly check it and make sure you've got enough, I think, at least. We also played a game that had no tutorials in it at all. So that obviously, I mean, this doesn't even seem like a valid criticism, but obviously that needs to be in the game, because right now, as someone who's never played Hearts of Iron, probably the first 5 hours I spent just being like, what in the hell is going on? But if you've played a Paradox game before, the interface is similar enough that you don't have to go through that kind of, you know, bed of nails again. You don't have to learn the Paradox UI. You're mostly going to have it figured out, or at least you're going to have enough affinity for or adequacy with the Paradox UI to figure it out for yourself fairly quickly. Also, I can't help but feel that because it's in living memory, the Second World War is a little bit more of an interesting time period for more people, probably. Not necessarily myself and not necessarily you, but I think that provides kind of like an extra motivation for people when it comes to learning it and understanding alternate history. Because if you talk to somebody about, like, you know, the year 900, and you're like, well, I was playing CK2, the Old Gods, and it was crazy, you know, Thuringia ended up annexing blah, 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 and their eyes will glaze over. But if you're telling somebody like, oh, I was playing Hearts of Iron 4, and I was playing as the United States, and the World War broke out in, like, 1938, and I ended up occupying all of Italy, and, you know, it's a little bit more of an engaging and relatable story. People are still probably going to look at you like you're a big dork, but that's okay. So, I mean, there's there's the reasons it's more complex for sure, and then there's reasons maybe it's a little bit more accessible, but certainly the reputation that Hearts of Iron has is that it's not for casual players like myself. Hearts of Iron 3, I can play. I can play it and not be super overwhelmed, and I can play it and not fully understand the minute inner workings of absolutely everything and still be able to succeed, actually. I annexed the Soviet Union, which I don't think is necessarily say it's too easy. Let's keep in mind I did have all of France on my side, which is actually a very powerful ally to have in the Second World War, perhaps contrary to ignorant popular belief. Anyway, is it newbie friendly? Yes and no. I'm not the person to ask you if it was, or to ask if it was over casualized, you know? I know that there's some discourse about that on the internet. You're asking the wrong person. You gotta talk to a Roomba about that, or somebody who has more experience in Hearts of Iron 3. In terms of other stuff that you might be interested to know, the games were not buggy. We had a couple of bugs, but I also, some of the things where people were like, oh, that's a bug. I was kind of like, maybe you just don't know what you're doing. Like, in a game this complex, they're like, well, I wanted to do this, but it didn't work out the way that I intended. It was a bug. And I'm like, well, it could be a bug. I'm with you. But also, maybe you just don't know what you're doing. And that's not bad. Like, I don't know what I'm doing either, but I'm skeptical of all the things that people said were bugs actually being bugs. But keep that in mind. There were no game-breaking bugs. We were playing 20-person deep multiplayer matches. We had 2 or 3 crashes, I think, over the course of the whole thing. Mind you, we were playing on LAN, I think, so desync issues are going to be probably rarer, and we were all in very, very close connection with one another. So it's an ideal environment, which is something I always like to bring up at these events. And that goes for the dynamics of the game as well. There is no better environment to play a Paradox Grand Strategy game than at a LAN party with like-minded nerds like yourself. So pretty much, you're not going to have the same crazy dynamic stories probably coming out of your single-player games or even your online multiplayer games, but you could. That's the best chance, I think. Which is not to say that it's going to be bad in single-player, it's just not going to be the same. So always take that with a grain of salt when you get like breathless enthusiasm from previews like this. Trying to think of what else I can even talk about here. The overall thing that I would say is it's more than 6 months to go until release. I believe Johan from Paradox did confirm in a forum post that the game's not going to come out in 2015. I think that's good. It's a great game mechanically right now. Some janky animations, need some overall polish, and some of the AA countries, which is kind of an offensive way to put it, but some of the countries that are not necessarily major focuses, the major focuses, major players being, if I can remember them. You got United Kingdom, France, United States, Germany, USSR, Italy, Japan. Those are the major powers at the start of the game, for lack of a better word. There's no major power system. Those are the ones that it encourages you to play as. Outside of those, it would be good if there were national focuses for more countries. There's like a default national focus tree that gives you some options, but it's the same for every country that is not one of those major ones, right? So it would be cool if there were more reasons to play as AA countries beyond, like, I'm Canadian, I want to play as Canada. That gives me an extra sense of personal connection and it would be fun. Overall polish, some bug fixing. It's got time to do it. Some balanced things might help out a lot as well. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if this game has the longevity, as is right now. If it has the longevity of EU4 and CK2, because it really does. My number one concern about the game, and it's not even a concern in terms of its execution, it's a concern in terms of design, is will it have the same kind of play, 600, 700 hours of it, as a lot of people have with EU4? There's less room to maneuver, I think, in Hearts of Iron, but is that what's going to make the difference for people? Is the fact that alternate realities are going to be a little bit harder to come by, or alternate histories, I should say, is that going to drive people to play it less? Are they going to do a couple of campaigns and be like, all right, that's good enough? Or are they going to become obsessed with it and be like, you know, I'm going to change the outcome of the war, buy as much as I can, which is probably just a little bit more than a slight nudge in either direction, unless you're playing as one of the major powers. That's what I'm interested to see, and the best thing I can say about Hearts of Iron 4 is that I had more fun with it as time went on. Like sitting next to people that really knew what they were doing, Paradox employees coming by and helping out, teaching you stuff as you go. I had more fun as time went on, as I learned more and more about what I was doing. I wasn't as bad as you think I was. But still. And as soon as I got home, I played like another quick game basically on speed 4, speed 5 most of the time. And I played like 6 or 7 years of a Germany game. That's where I annexed the USSR, and I was like, this is fun. I'm really excited to see when it comes out. I want to. It gave me that feeling of like, I want to be good at this game. I want to get in on the ground floor of a Paradox game and actually be good, god dang it, for the first time. But hopefully this has been somewhat of an informative preview of Hearts of Iron 4. I can't help but feel that if you're a diehard Paradox fanboy who cares about the minutia of the game, you've watched 25 minutes of this and learned nothing, I apologize, but I'm thankful you stuck around. For those of you who are a little bit more casual enthusiasts like me, I hope you got a feel for what the game is like. There's some footage in the background. I hope you've enjoyed it. For now, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed it, show your support. Click the like button. It helps out a great deal. And, of course, subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Hearts of Iron 4, currently no release date scheduled for release when it's done. Probably 2016.